Hello, thank you for listening. My name is Liu Wei, and I want to tell you a story from a time when I was just 22 years old, though I felt much older then and feel younger now, strangely enough. Before the war turned our world to rust and ash, my life was simple. It smelled of cutting oil and hot metal. I was a factory worker in Wuhan, a city of life and noise on the Great River. My days were governed by the rhythm of machines, the great presses stamping steel, the lathes turning out perfect cylinders. A machine has a language, you see. It speaks in vibrations, in the pitch of a whine, in the heat you feel through the sole of your boot. I learned that language. I came to believe that anything made by man could be understood by man, and if it could be understood, it could be fixed. A broken gear, a slipping belt, a fouled engine, they were just problems waiting for a solution. Logic, order, that was my world. The war taught me that the most important machine of all, the human heart, follows no such rules. People ask me now about the grand struggle, about fighting for China. And yes, that was there. The thought of my home, of Wuhan, under the Japanese flag was a sickness in my gut. But when you are inside the belly of a 30,000-pound steel beast, grand ideas become very small. They shrink until all that is left is the man next to you, the sound of your own breathing, and the voice of the engine. On that day in Hunan, in the spring of '45, my war wasn't about a free China. It began, as most things did for me, with the sound of a problem that needed fixing. The air inside our Stuart was thick enough to chew. It was a foul stew of sweat, diesel fumes, and the lingering ghost of cordite. 4 of us crammed into a space no bigger than a farmer's closet, rolling over the scarred earth of West Hunan. Outside, the world was a symphony of chaos conducted by madmen. Mortars coughed, machine guns chattered their hateful language, and the Japanese Arasakas snapped like dry twigs underfoot. But inside, our world was the engine. Its steady, throaty roar was the only constant, the only truth. It was our iron heart, and I was its keeper. I could feel its vibrations through the steel floor plate, a familiar thrum that told me everything was as it should be. I was the loader, but my real job, the one our commander, Sergeant Bao, relied on, was listening. My ears were tuned to the machine's soul. I could tell a bad mix of fuel from a loose valve just by the change in pitch. It was the same skill I'd had in the factory, listening to the great stamping presses, knowing by the clang if a die was misaligned. Bao called me his tin doctor. We were pushing through a collapsed village, what was left of it. The mud, churned by artillery and rain, was a greedy thing, sucking at our tracks. Infantrymen, boys from Sichuan and Guangdong, used us for cover, their mud-caked forms flitting between the ruins like desperate ghosts. I remember seeing a young one, couldn't have been more than 17, give a quick nod to our vision slit as we passed. His face was a mask of dirt, but his eyes were bright with a terrible fire. Then it happened. Not a bang, not an explosion. A lurch, a violent, sickening heave to the left that threw me against the ammunition rack. It was followed by a sound I knew with absolute bone-deep certainty. The sound of 1,000 factory accidents, of catastrophic failure, a high-pitched shriek of tortured metal, then a loud, final asterisk clang. The right side track went slack. The engine roared in protest, uselessly spinning one side while the other was dead. We slewed sideways and ground to a halt, tilted at a drunken angle in the mud. Silence inside the tank. It was a new kind of silence, heavy and terrifying, made worse by the undiminished storm outside. We were a steel box, a coffin, my deepest, most secret fear, the one born from stories of factory fires where men were trapped by fallen machinery flared hot in my chest. To be caught, to be helpless, to burn. Status. Bao's voice was strained, tight as a piano wire. Track is gone, Sergeant, I said, my own voice sounding distant. Sounds like a master pin sheared. We've thrown the whole right track. Can you fix it? That was the question, wasn't it? The world outside was illogical, a nightmare of flying metal and dying men. But a sheared pin, a thrown track, that was a mechanical problem. That was my language. In the factory, I would have called for the crane, taken my time, had a cup of tea. Here the solution felt like a death sentence. I can, but I have to go outside. The words hung in the stale air. Outside. Into the maelstrom. A shell whined overhead and exploded somewhere behind us, rocking the tank on its broken suspension. The shrapnel pattered against our hull like hell's own rain. Going out there was suicide, but staying here. We were the perfect target. An immobile steel box, just waiting for an anti-tank gun to find its range, or for a soldier with a magnetic mind to crawl out of the mud. We would be cooked alive. My mind, the mechanic's mind, was already running through the steps. Pry the track, find the brake, hammer out the damaged links, connect the ends with a spare pin, use the engine's torque to pull it back on the bogies. a logical sequence. A series of steps, but each step was a dance with death. My thoughts were stripped gears, grinding uselessly against the illogical reality of the battlefield. The smell of oil on my hands suddenly reminded me of the factory, of a peaceful afternoon fixing a conveyor belt, the only danger a pinched finger. A sensory ghost, a memory so clear and painful it made my eyes water. Bao made the decision. Do it. We'll give you cover. Zhang, get on the 30 cal, don't stop firing. He popped the hatch. The roar of the battle flooded in, a physical force. He exchanged shouts with an infantry officer huddled behind a shattered wall. I grabbed the heavy sledgehammer and the pry bar, my heart a frantic, trapped bird against my ribs. As I climbed out, the world resolved from the muffled drumming I heard inside to a full-blown apocalypse of sound and fury. The sky was a sickly yellow-gray, choked with smoke, and then I saw him again, the young soldier. The one with the bright eyes. He and two of his comrades were at the front of our tank, using our dead hull as a barricade. He saw me, saw the tools in my hands. He understood instantly. He gave me that same quick nod, then turned to his friends and barked an order. They laid down a blistering field of fire towards a ruined house where Japanese rifles were flashing. He looked back at me. He didn't say a word. He just pointed his rifle forward and started firing, protecting me. I went to work. I slid into the mud, the world shrinking to the space between the road wheels and the thrown track. The noise was a constant pressure, but I forced it out. I was a mechanic. This was a machine, that was all. My world was the greasy, mud-caked steel. The clang of my hammer against the pin was a familiar sound, a piece of home in this foreign hell. One hit, two hits, sweat and mud mingled, running into my eyes. My knuckles were raw. A bullet ricocheted off the hull inches from my head with a sound like a giant's whip crack. I didn't flinch. I couldn't afford to. My protector kept firing. His rifle was a steady, rhythmic bark. Crack, 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 crack. It was a beat I timed my hammer blows to. Crack, bam, crack, crack, bam, bam. We were two parts of a different kind of machine now, a desperate, living one. He was the shield, I was the gear. He kept death at bay. I worked to bring us back to life. I got the broken link free. My hands were slick with grease and my own blood, but they moved with the certainty of long practice. I was in the zone, the place where the world disappears and only the problem remains. I was almost there. I had the new pin ready. I looked up for a second just to wipe the sting from my eyes to see my guardian. He wasn't firing. He was standing strangely still, his rifle pointing at the ground. There was a dark, wet stain spreading across his chest, blossoming like some terrible flower. His bright eyes were wide, but they weren't seeing me. They were seeing nothing at all. He swayed, a puppet with its strings cut, and then he collapsed into the mud, face down. A single, perfect red circle was growing in the brown water around his head. Something inside me broke. A gear sheared off in my soul. The logic, it was gone. He was dead. He died so I could fix a machine. A human life traded for a metal pin. The equation made no sense. It was a catastrophic failure of a system I couldn't begin to comprehend. The roar of the battle faded to a dull hum. All I could see was his small, still form in the mud. All I could hear was the final, useless beat of my own heart. A hand grabbed my shoulder and shook me hard. It was Sergeant Bao. Wei. Get it done now. I looked from the boy to the track. My hands moved, but they weren't mine anymore. I hammered the last pin in. The motion was mechanical, detached. I felt nothing but a vast, hollow cold. I scrambled back inside the tank, my clothes soaked in mud and something else. I didn't look back at him. I couldn't. It's done, I gasped, falling into my seat. Bao slammed the hatch shut, plunging us back into our steel womb. Driver, easy, pull it on. The engine groaned. The tank lurched, and with a series of grinding shrieks, the track caught, tightened, and settled back onto the bogies. We were whole again. We were alive. We began to move, pulling away from that spot, leaving the boy behind in the mud. No one spoke. The only sound was the steady, rhythmic asterisk, clank, clank, clank asterisk of the newly repaired track. The sound of a problem solved. The sound of a debt I could never repay. I spent the rest of my life working with machines. After the war, I went back to the factories. I built things, I fixed things. I was good at it, but I never again believed that everything could be fixed. Some things, some people, some moments, they break in ways that you can't put back together. You can hammer in a new pin, replace a broken part, but the machine is never the same. It carries the ghost of the break forever. That boy on the battlefield, he was a component. A part sacrificed to keep the larger machine of our tank, our platoon, our army, running. That is the terrible logic of war. But he wasn't a piece of steel. He had a name I never knew, a family I would never meet, a life of 20 or 60 more years that was traded for my few minutes with a sledgehammer. I fixed the tank, but I broke my own soul. That is a repair you cannot make. The hardest lesson is this. In war, you are not asked to choose between right and wrong. You are asked to choose between what is broken and what is shattered. You choose the thing that lets you survive another day, and you spend the rest of your life trying to justify the cost. You learn to live with the parts you had to leave behind in the mud. This memory is a piece of shrapnel I carry. It's heavy. Help me carry it. Subscribe and ensure these stories are never left to rust in silence.